The government has tabled the 14th Finance Commission report in the Parliament today. Remember, this is a report which recommends the distribution of taxes between the centre as well as the state. Now, currently, the share of states in, the central tax revenues stand at 32%. But as CNBC TV 18 has been reporting, it's likely to go up from the current 32%. So that figure will be, the key salient feature that we'll be watching out for. What will be the new percentage of, the central tax revenues, which will be going to the states. Currently, it stands at 32%, and this will be for a period of 5 years, which begins the 1st of April 2015 to 31st of March 2020. So the government has tabled the 14th Finance Commission report in the Parliament. Now we're awaiting the key features. What will be the share of states in the centre's, tax revenues? And this will be important because it has various implications. If, for instance, the share of states in the central tax revenue does go up from the current 32%, which means perhaps the government is going to have less money to spend for itself, for the centre projects, and therefore will it have any implications on the finances? Would it pressure it in any case? Once the states get more, it changes the arithmetic of the centre-state relations. It will help in greater development for states as well. So it has, various ramifications. So we'll need a lot more detail. So what we understand that it's likely to, go up from the current 32%, the share of states of the central tax revenue.
Amongst the other demands, amongst the other things that is expected is that there would be a tax devolution based on the 2011 census. And remember, the earlier census is 1971. And it's states like UP, Bihar and West Bengal which would gain substantially if the tax devolution is based on the 2011 census. Amongst others, we also understand that some of the centrally sponsored schemes may be cut, and no major impact is seen on the state's finances because of this. But let's see what actually comes about. I mean, as of now, it's just speculation as to what could actually come out of this report. So far, all we know is that it's been tabled. We don't have details yet on what it includes.
Yes, we'll try and speak to Sapna for more details on this. She's been tracking the story very closely. So this was the commission was shared by Mr. Y.V. Reddy. It was, I think, constituted on the 1st of January 2013. They had to submit it by the 31st of October, and then they got a 2-month extension for that. So the government has tabled it. Apart from that, the government has also tabled the amendment to the MMDR bill in the Lok Sabha. Let's see if it gets passed. Still trying to get more details. Perhaps we'll be joined by Sapna Das. So we'll get in our in-house expert, Lata Venkatesh as well. She's been speaking to a lot of experts on what the 14th Finance Commission report might entail, and therefore what it will mean for the centre as well as states. But as of now, this is all that we have. Other than that, as Sumera pointed out, that one number that we're watching out for, what will be the new share of states in the centre tax revenues from the current 32%. We understand it could go up by 2.5%. There are certain reports that it could go as high as a hefty 42%. So that too has been doing the rounds in the various pink papers. This new number could be based on the 2011 census versus the earlier 1971, which means that it will benefit a lot of population-heavy states like UP, Bihar and West Bengal. But while we get in more details, we'll keep tracking the story, keep it alive.
One of the other things is also that untied grants could see a major jump this time, which is actually the amount that the states can spend on their own without central government sanction. So this, portion which is called untied grants could also see a big jump. So let's see if all of these, what we're actually speculating on, come through. But
42% of the net tax receipts will be going to the states. So that is a very sharp increase compared to the current 32%. So the centre will devolve 42% of its tax revenues. That will be the share which will be going to the states from the current 32%. CNBC TV 18 has been reporting that there will be a jump in the amount that the centre will be giving to the states, and now the number is out. The final figure stands at 5.26 lakh crore. That will be the F516 devolution of net taxes to the states, 5.26 lakh crore. 42% has also been spoken about, in various media circles. So it shouldn't come as a big surprise, but it definitely marks a very significant increase. So there will be more money given to the states in order to fuel the state's development. However, that also means that more money will be coming out of the centre's kitty. So the question mark remains on what happens to the centre's own finances. As of now, these are the two details that we have. The key number to focus on is that now 42% of the net taxes from the centre will be going to the states, and that marks a sharp increase from the current 32%. So 42% is the key figure, and that turns out to be a number of 5.26 lakh crore. That's the FY16 devolution of net taxes going to the states. We'll try and get in, our in-house expert, Lata Venkatesh, as well on these details. But this shouldn't come as a big surprise.
We should also try and touch base with Rituparna. He's in Parliament, so he'll probably have some more details on what else is included. For now, we know that the Finance Minister says that states should use extra fiscal space for productive avenues. Lata Venkatesh is with us. Lata, what are you making of these initial comments?
Well, this was always expected to be one of the key highlights of the 14th Finance Commission, that it was going to give a larger portion of compulsory devolution of money from the centre to the states. Now, we must understand the spirit and the exact impact. While, when you look at the budget at a glance page, you have the total gross receipts of the centre, and from that you take away net receipts to the centre. Then you get the extent of devolution. Until now, it used to be 32% of the net taxes, but that was not the only money that went to the states. About, if you assume, say, 2 lakh crore went, another 50,000 crore would go as grants, which are also statutory. Now, it is possible that this 42% is because those grants have been baked into the compulsory devolution. There could be an element of discretion about the grants. So this need not necessarily mean that because of this 42%, the centre has less money. The centre was anyway devolving not just the compulsory taxes that actually belong to the states but are collected by the centre and then shared with the states. In addition, they were always giving grants. That is perhaps now made a compulsory devolution. So it need not necessarily mean less is available with the centre. This was anyway being passed upon. By making it compulsory, it gives the states the freedom in terms of end use. If it is a grant, it is usually to a specific purpose. It is tied to an end use. Now, by making it a compulsory devolution, it gives states the freedom to use it any which way they want. I mean, the grants may come in for, maintenance of some heritage property. It could be, just about anything. Now, these come without any end-use restriction, and therefore the states have a lot more freedom. So, it is in a spirit of respecting the federal structure of the constitution that these grants have been made. And systematically, previous finance commissions also have been increasing the allotment to the states. It comes at a time when the former state chief minister, and a very successful one at that, is the prime minister. So my sense is this is going to be politically very happily endorsed.
All right, let's also go across to Rituparna Bhuyan, who joins us on the line. Ritu, what more details can you fill us in on what's in the report?
Well, it's a two-part report, and it's two thick volumes actually, 300 pages. About 250 pages, 260 pages in the first volume itself. So I'm just going through the highlights as of now. And of course, as we just flash, the recommendation is of 42%, which of union tax receipts to states, which according to this note, which the finance minister has addressed as far as this report is concerned. In FY16, this will mean a devolution of 5.26 lakh crores on a year basis. This means an increase of 1.78 lakh crores. What's interesting is that there is also a dissent note by Professor Abhijit Sen, who was a part-time member and who had actually suggested a 38% devolution and not 42%. Another interesting feature is regarding a revenue deficit grant. The Commission has recommended that the centre should be granting about 1.94 lakh crores to 11 states to meet their respective revenue deficits. And according to this note, which the finance minister himself has written, and this is a part of the report, the government has accepted the recommendations in principle, the grants in aid to be subject to revenue raising and fiscal consolidation measures undertaken by the states. There are recommendations on how grants will be given to local bodies as well. There is a mechanism that has also been suggested, and as far as the grants to local bodies is concerned, in a period between 2015 and 2020, the Commission has worked out the total grant to be around 2.87 lakh crores. I'm going to the other recommendations. It's a pretty huge report, and I'll join you in a minute.
We'll leave you to read it in peace, because we have with us actually the author of the report, or one of the 5 authors of the report. Professor Sudipto Mundle joins us. Dr. Mundle, if in your words you can tell us what were the key recommendations, what are the key recommendations of the 14th Finance Commission? Some of them have come to us after tabling in the Parliament. We know that you all have recommended that 42% of the centre's taxes be devolved to the states, compared to 32% recommended by the 13th Finance Commission. We also understand that you all have recommended a 1.94 lakh crore of monies be transferred to the states as a revenue deficit grant. We understand the Finance Minister has accepted all the recommendations in toto. But if you can tell us what are the major recommendations?
Yeah, first of all, we have indeed raised the devolution share, as you just mentioned, but at the same time, we have reduced the allocation of Finance Commission grants quite substantially. So the takeaway from that is that the fiscal space of Union government has not been eroded at all. It remains exactly more or less where it was with the 13th Finance Commission recommendation. That's a very important point to understand. Now, what it means is that the structure of transfers has been shifted from grants, which are, more condition-oriented and discretion so on, to non-discretionary devolutionary transfers, which is the bit that you said has been raised, so that the states are now free to decide how they should spend their money rather than being dictated either by the Finance Commission or the Union government on how the money is to be used. I think that's a very important feature to focus on. Secondly, of the few grants that we have given, I think your person already mentioned that there's a grant for the Panchayati Raj institutions and urban local bodies and so on. That is indeed true. But we have linked it to the fulfillment of certain conditions relating to State Finance Commission.
Okay.
Again, the main feature of that is we are trying to put some money behind supporting devolution even below the state level.
Okay.
That has been our philosophical orientation, without in any way compromising on the fiscal space of the Union government.
Okay.
The other point about revenue deficit grants is that we have tried to bring about an equalization across states in terms of the quality of service that is provided.
Okay.
In other words, a citizen of India who pays from the same tax regime, whether he lives in Tamil Nadu or Punjab or Maharashtra or Bihar or wherever, will be eligible to the same level of public services such as in education, health, etc., etc. And on that basis, we have calculated where a state's own capacity, because of its backwardness, is lower than what is required to meet the minimum level of public services, we have given what is called the this deficit grant.
Okay. So a couple of factual questions. When you said that you are given this equalization of services grant, which are the states that stand to gain because of this?
There are, at the moment I don't have the report in front of me, but I think a number of them are we have not referred to them as special category states, but at the moment they are often described as special category states, such as those in the northeast and so on.
Okay.
But there are a few others. I don't have the full list, but if you have the report, you can just read it off there.
Yeah, we are given to understand that the current devolution after the 14th Finance Commission recommendations would be 5.26 lakh crore rupees, right?
Yeah, again, that if you got the report in front of you, I don't have it.
No, not exactly in front of me, but that was what my colleague Rituparna read out. But can you tell us how much of the grants have been reduced? In the erstwhile dispensation, when 32% was compulsorily devolved in a non-discretionary fashion, what was the amount involved in the last financial year? and how much of it was transferred as grant?
I'm not a computer. I don't have the numbers in my head.
All right. No, I'm just trying to guess how much of the grants.
The important point to focus on is that to the extent the devolution has been raised to 42%, there's a corresponding reduction on the grant side.
Which you said is 1.78 lakh crore.
Yeah. So if you take it as a proportion of GDP, you will find that it is no different from more or less. There may be a 1% difference up or down. Basically, is the same as was given by the 13th Finance Commission. Only the manner in which the transfers are to be implemented has changed. It is now non-discretionary transfers to the states, so that they are now free to exercise their sovereignty and decide on how they will spend their money, because they're close to the ground. They know about the details of their schemes and so forth. There's been a substantial reduction in these conditional grants that were given earlier.
Professor Mundle, please stay on. We have Indira Rajaraman also joining us in, who was the member of the previous Finance Commission. I just wanted her take on what you have just told us. Dr. Rajaraman, as was widely reported, the devolution has now been increased from 32%, which your commission recommended, to 42%. And the increase is almost entirely the grants being made into statutory devolution. Now, what's your sense? Does this genuinely free up the position of the states considerably without tying end use?
Yes, of course. To the extent that this increase by 10 percentage points will fold in not merely what were the earlier statutory grants, but also possibly some earlier non-statutory grants of the kind that were going in planned flows. To the extent those are also folded into this, then absolutely it gives the states more discretion, and that is correct. That is indeed correct.
Okay. Well, Dr. Rajaraman, this works out with my quick calculation to 4% of the GDP. This 5.26 lakh crore, which the current commission has devolved in the current year, in the first year of its operation, I would assume, works out to 4% of the nominal GDP. Was that a constant? Even in your time, it was 4%?
No, it was slightly less, but then you must remember that we were calculating it on the basis of the 32%, and the statutory grants that we had prescribed were, in absolute form rather than as a percentage of tax receipts. So adding the two, I don't exactly know what the number was in the current financial year and the financial year that is just about to close, but I think 5.26 lakh crore would be a touch above what we would have prescribed as a sum of tax share and absolute grants.
Okay, my calculation was 4 lakh crore, but I could be wrong.
It's probably, it sounds right to me, yes.
4 lakh crore? Yeah. Okay, Dr. Mundle, any other key takeaways other than the devolution that you think are seminal contributions of the Finance Commission, 14th Finance Commission?
Well, we have proposed the setting up, we have recommended, because it's not really our call.
Yes.
On the fiscal space, as I said, that has been preserved as before for the union government. A lot of that was going as discretionary grants under what are known as the centrally sponsored schemes.
Yes.
Now, we have not interfered with the centre's independence in that, but we have proposed that such transfers that it wants to give under such schemes may be done on the basis of a platform where the states are also represented, so that they can jointly decide on the structure of the schemes and other details, rather than the top-down thing as has been the case in the past and has been criticized by all concerned, including the Rajaraman Commission and so forth. So we have proposed an institutional arrangement under which they could do this, and I hope that the union government will implement that, in which, as I'm sure Indira will also agree, this would again give greater flexibility to the states on how to use the money under various programs for education, health, so forth.
Mr. Mundle, we understand that there was one dissent note in the report recommending a lower share. Can you give us the rationale for that dissent note? What was the key rationale that they had recommended a lower share?
Well, you should really talk to Professor Sen, who was the author of the dissent note. But from what I recall, basically he was saying that let us leave a little more space for the union government to give some of those grants under the centrally sponsored schemes for reasons which he had in mind, and I think you should discuss it with him. I don't want to, sort of think ahead about what he said. He's written it, so you should consult him about it.
Okay, but his central argument
qualitatively, I think, there are numbers, little, basically, in fact, he started off the dissent note by saying that the main conclusions and recommendations of our commission, he is fully on board with that. It's just on some specific numbers that he has a difference.
Okay, do stay on, sir. Dr. Rajaraman, your thoughts at a time when the centre is all charged up for development, do you think this might crimp the space a bit?
This might crimp
Centre's space,
yes,
if they want to pump
yes.
prime the economy.
Yes. Who are you saying will suffer from this? The centre?
Yeah, the centre's ability to pump prime the economy could be curbed, do you think?
No. At the end of the day, investment, which is what the economy needs, has to be enabled in the constituent states of the country, and to the extent that states, or at least some of them, have very clear ideas about what they want to do to attract investment, to that extent they will be empowered. Of course, the flip side of that is that some states which are not, which do not have clear plans for what they would do with this enhanced flow coming to them, might waste what is coming to them. So some states might forge ahead, and some states may fall behind in terms of their ability to use this additional funding coming from the centre.
Okay, well, actually, we are now at a state where the states are sufficiently hydrated. There is this, manna coming from the centre, which, well, perhaps, as both of you say, is not much different, but the nature of the transfer is untied and therefore entirely at the discretion of the states. They're also making some money on mining royalty. As well, the centrally sponsored schemes like NREGS and other schemes, I think the PM, the Rozgar Yojana, are also being now implemented by the states themselves. The money is just being granted as of last year. Does that not make for a substantial rise in the amount of money available with the states, Dr. Mundle?
As I said before, I think the basic change is in the structure of the way in which the resources will be made available. They will have much greater say on how those resources are to be spent. Okay. But as a proportion of GDP, it is, for all the states taken together, it is not really higher. The total transfer percentage is more or less exactly the same. The only point I want to emphasize also is that, as Indira was saying quite rightly, see, when you want to give greater powers to the states, devolution, the other side of the coin is that there is greater competition between states, and there'll be winners and losers in that game. Some will do better than others. However, we have as I said, we tried to give this equalization grant, revenue deficit grant, and in computing that, we have actually factored in what a state should be raising in terms of its own resources, etc. So that if they fall short of that, there's implicitly a penalty involved. So some incentives were built in to try and get the states to, perform well in terms of their own management of their own. But I have to say that the experience during the 13th Finance Commission's period and even the 12th Finance is that the states, by and large, have actually been quite prudent in the way they manage their finances.
Okay. Well, I think Dr. Rajaraman's guess is right. The indicative ceiling which the 13th Finance Commission mentioned in terms of the overall transfer to the states on the revenue account was set at 39.5% of the gross revenue receipts of the centre. So this at 42 is quite clearly 2.5 percentage points more than what the 13th Finance Commission said. The 13th Finance Commission also spoke about a medium-term fiscal plan. Dr. Mundle, have you all made any such recommendations?
Yes, we were asked to do that, and again we have indeed provided a medium-term fiscal consolidation plan, but our focus has been more on the states than on the union government. And there again we have, because states some states are fiscally stronger than others.
Yes.
And therefore could really afford to borrow a little more than the weaker states and so on. So we've, built in some provisions for that, so that a state which has got a very low debt ratio and which is a very comfortable fiscal position can indeed borrow a little more than another state which may be fiscally constrained. So that flexibility we have built into it.
But you'll have asked the states as well to bring down their fiscal and revenue deficits?
Yes, and that is exactly in line with, we were basically stuck to the roadmap on that score that was laid out by the 13th Finance Commission with this element of flexibility that I just mentioned.
Okay.
And as far as the union government is concerned,
yes,
we have also stuck to more or less the kind of fiscal consolidation path that has been recommended in the past with some adjustments at the margin.
So under your commission as well, you all are recommending 3.6% fiscal deficit for FY16 and 3.1% for FY17?
Yeah, as I said, I'm sitting in the car when you're talking to me. I don't have the numbers in front of me.
Okay.
And we submit reports. So, but again, qualitative, the picture is we have essentially gone along with what had been said earlier in terms of the fiscal consolidation path. Subject to the corrections that were made because, the baseline had changed. So, if you recall, there was a speaker committee which made some recommendations. Indira was also part of that. That is the one that we have more or less, tried to follow.
All right. Dr. Mundle, Dr. Rajaraman, thank you very much for joining us with your take. So it looks like those are the major recommendations in terms of devolution. That's the big number, that 42%. I think that is the big takeaway. As well, they have reiterated the medium-term fiscal plan, which was put forth by the 13th Finance Commission and then reiterated by the Kelkar Committee. We have more experts joining us.
Yes, we have Dr. Samiran Chakraborty, the head of research at StanChart Bank, also joining us on the phone line. Thanks, Samiran, for waiting by patiently. First, your initial reaction: 42% is what the devolution number will be, but this time it includes the total transfer of funds, not just the 32%, which was earlier done on the statutory transfers.
Oh, well, this is very much in line with our expectations. We were working with this 42% share of states for our own budget assumptions, but we were thinking that about 7% of this will be cut from the other grants going to states, particularly on the centrally sponsored schemes, the CSS schemes. Now, I'm not sure whether, so our net number was 35% will go to states vis-a-vis 32% earlier. I'm not sure whether the actual recommendations are saying this will be 35 or this will be brought all the way back to 32 or not.
No, Samiran, I think Dr. Mundle was very clear, and since he's the author of the report, there was no confusion on that. They have recommended 42%, and that includes practically all the grants. So the total transfer now of the centre to the states stands at 42%, all of which is devolution without any discretion attached as to end use. As well, I'm just reading out from the 13th Finance Commission. That commission, the total ceiling on the revenues transferred from centre to states was set at 39.5%. So clearly 2.5 percentage points more is being transferred to the states, and the entire 42% looks like is the entire grant portion has been baked into non-discretionary compulsory transfers.
It amounts to the same. That means when we calculate the net of states shared the central taxes, that should lie somewhere around 34.5% now, because the 2.5% on top of the 32% should have to be baked in. But the bigger question will be that how will the states spend this money, and what kind of readiness they have in getting this additional money and spending it at least for the next fiscal year. I think that remains the biggest question.
Okay. Would this put pressure on the state's centre's finances and therefore the fiscal deficit, because it has to be incorporated in the union budget as well?
As I was mentioning that in our budget calculation, we had already built in that this 32% will go to about 34.5%, 35%. And still we were able to get a 3.6% fiscal deficit to GDP, primarily because the tax revenue buoyancy this time is going to be very high because of the excise duty on petrol products, which is going to give you about 70,000 crores extra. And if you add to it the customs duty, that gives you another 20,000 crores extra.
Okay. No, Samiran, where do you think this money might be used? Do you think this will relieve some of the DISCOM stress? I mean, there is a huge contingent liability sitting on the P&L accounts of the state governments. They've underwritten some of the financial losses and shortcomings of the electricity companies. Which sector do you think could see some kind of either expenditure or at least alleviation of stress? This can be seen as positive, isn't it, in terms of alleviation of DISCOM stress?
Well, I don't think 29 states will react uniformly to this. Every state will have its own priorities, and based on that, will use this money. It will be very interesting to see whether there is any guidance from the government in this regard or not. And since we still have about 66 centrally sponsored schemes running, whether the states will kind of shut down some of these schemes and start their own schemes, all these things are at this point just a matter of conjecture.
Oh, right. Before we leave you, what are you expecting in terms of fiscal deficit, or what will be the big number you'll watch out for on Saturday?
We're still going with the 3.6% fiscal deficit to GDP number, and we think that even after maintaining 3.6, the capital expenditure to GDP ratio could be increased from 1.5% to more than 2%. If we see that kind of a switch in spending along with consolidation of fiscal deficit, then I think that's a pretty decent fiscal math.
All right. Any other comments you wanted to make on the Finance Commission?
No, not really.
Okay.
I'll still do look at the thing on the road, so I haven't seen it.
All right.
No, thanks.
Thanks a lot, Samiran. Well, that's all we have actually from the Finance Commission, that the total amount of money devolved will be 42% of the gross revenues, tax revenues of the centre, which is at least 2.5 percentage points more than what the previous commission had recommended. And all this 42%, unlike the previous commission, which was 32% compulsory devolution, and the remaining largely went as grants with some specific end use tied to them. This entire 42% will go as non-discretionary and mandatory transfers from the centre to the states, giving the states a little more money and a lot more leeway to spend that money. Comes at a time when, of course, some of the states at least are getting richer because of mining royalties as well. There are also some recommendations made in terms of monies to local government. We don't have the details, but some of that is also being recommended as further federalism. As well, there is a recommendation of 1.94 lakh crore, which looks like is outside this 5.26. We're not very clear, which should be spent to equalize the level of education, health and other basic services across states. So this will largely go to the more backward states. There is as well a recommendation of medium-term fiscal plan, both for the centre and for the states. Importantly for the centre, which is what we are concerned with on the eve of the budget, it largely sticks to the 13th Finance Commission and the Kelkar recommendations, which is 3.6% of the GDP being the fiscal deficit, be the fiscal deficit for FY16 and 3.1% for FY17.
I just have one clarification from you. When you were asking questions, you said in the 13th Finance Commission a number of 39.5%. So from which it's an increase of 42%. What was the 39.5% in the 13th Commission?
Total revenue transfer from the centre to the state. So on from the centre to the state, 32% was transferred by the 13th Finance Commission mandatorily without any strings attached. Under the constitution, there are some taxes which can be collected only by the centre because of the very nature of
So like to like, would you compare 42 with 39.5%?
No,
or would you compare 32?
We'll compare 39.5. See, actually, you have to compare both. In terms of the quality of the transfer, you have to compare 32 and 42. Because these are without any end-use restriction.
Okay.
So the states get much more leeway as to how they will spend it. The point is that this doesn't make the center any poorer. Because anyway, they were transferring 32% and another 7.5%, which Samiran mentioned, as grants. So that is now becoming compulsory. 7.5 was transferred with an end use mentioned. It is being transferred without that end use condition. I think we have another guest joining us, Laveesh Bhandari, the chief economist at Indicus Analytics and an expert on state finances, joins us. Laveesh, your first thoughts. Mandatory transfer of 42% versus 32% with no end users. That's the key recommendation. Your comment?
Well, this is absolutely something that we have needed to do for a long time. And so all the transfers need to be untied. And I think that's a fantastic recommendation. And I think the states are more than capable of addressing their own requirements and then allocating their own funds. So I think this is a very good recommendation.
Do you see any impact on centrally sponsored schemes?
Sorry?
Do you see any impact, Laveesh, on centrally sponsored schemes? Because now the money that is given to states do not have an end use tied to it.
So the centrally sponsored schemes will anyway change in character as we go along. And I think the first step in this whole direction towards greater decentralization has to be greater allocations to the state and greater freedom for them to allocate. As for the centrally sponsored schemes, they will also, I think, over a period of time, allow greater freedoms to the states.
Okay. Laveesh, where may the money be spent? Do you think that, loans of discoms, which are contingent liabilities with state governments, will be met? From an economy point of view, where would we see the money flowing?
I think that's difficult to address at this point in time, simply because every state has its own priorities. Some of them have far greater debts on the SEBs than others. So I think that's a difficult question to answer at this point in time. However, one can say that many of the states will be far more careful with their allocations than they have been in the past, simply because now they have been given greater responsibility.
Okay, that's a positive note from an expert who studies the state finances very carefully. Laveesh, we have only that much from the Finance Commission, so we can't really ask you any more questions. I mean, the details will be known in the course of the day, and we will touch base with you later on. Thank you very much for joining us on this special discussion on the 14th Finance Commission.